In the bustling heart of Manhattan, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and luxury was a way of life, there stood an exclusive high-rise building known for housing some of the wealthiest individuals in the city. The lobby of this building gleamed, with marble floors, golden accents, and a grand chandelier that sparkled like diamonds under soft lighting. It was a place where only the elite dared to tread, or so it seemed. On this particular evening, 3 women entered the building, their heels clicking sharply against the polished floor as they made their way toward the elevators. Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia were no strangers to opulence. They lived and breathed extravagance. Dressed in designer gowns adorned with jewels, they exuded confidence and superiority. Their laughter echoed through the lobby, drawing attention from everyone around them. To many, these women appeared untouchable, icons of success and beauty. They approached the elevator bank. One of the doors slid open with a gentle ding. The trio stepped inside, still chatting animatedly about their plans for the night. They were headed to a charity gala at the penthouse, a glamorous event filled with champagne, fine dining, and networking opportunities with other influential figures. But just as the doors began to close, a quiet figure slipped into the elevator, behind them. This newcomer was unlike anyone else in the space. She wore a simple blouse paired with faded jeans, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. There wasn't a single piece of jewelry on her, nor did she carry the aura of someone who belonged in such an upscale environment. Her name was Emily Carter, though none of the others knew it yet. She pressed a button for an upper floor and stood silently in the corner, her presence almost blending into the background. Claire was the first to notice her. Her sharp eyes scanned Emily from head to toe, taking in every detail of her plain attire. A smirk tugged at the corners of her lips. Leaning closer to Vanessa and Patricia, she whispered loud enough for Emily to hear. "Well, isn't this interesting? Looks like we have unexpected company." Vanessa stifled a laugh, raising her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. "Oh dear," she said mockingly. "I hope she knows this isn't the service entrance. Maybe we should point her in the right direction." Patricia joined in, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Honestly, what's someone like that doing in a building like this? Did she wander in by mistake?" The 3 women exchanged amused glances, their giggles filling the small space. Emily heard every word. She could feel their judgmental stares boring into her, but she didn't flinch or react. Instead, she kept her gaze fixed on the glowing numbers above the elevator door, watching as they climbed higher. Her calm demeanor only fueled their mockery further. "You know," Claire continued, leaning casually against the mirrored wall, "there's something almost poetic about it, like a bird flying too close to the sun. Sweetheart," she turned to address Emily directly now, her tone condescending, "you might want to stick to places more suited to your style." Emily finally glanced at her, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment their eyes met, and Claire felt a flicker of unease. There was something about those eyes, calm, steady, and wise, that unsettled her. But before she could dwell on it, the elevator jolted slightly, causing all 4 women to grab onto the handrails instinctively. "Oh, great," Vanessa muttered, rolling her eyes. "Of course this happens when we're stuck with, well, you know." She gestured vaguely toward Emily, as if the malfunction was somehow her fault. The lights flickered, plunging the elevator into semi-darkness for a split second before emergency lighting kicked in. Panic rippled through the group. Claire clutched her purse tightly, her earlier bravado melting away. Vanessa started hyperventilating, fanning herself dramatically despite the cool air. Even Patricia, usually composed, looked visibly shaken. But Emily remained unfazed. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Her fingers moved swiftly across the screen as she spoke calmly into the receiver. "Hello. Yes, this is Unit 12. We're stuck between floors. Can you send someone up, please?" Her voice carried authority, leaving no room for doubt that help would arrive soon. Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia watched her in stunned silence. For the first time since stepping into the elevator, they realized there was more to this woman than met the eye. "How did you know what to do?" Vanessa asked hesitantly, her earlier mockery replaced by curiosity. Emily shrugged lightly. "It's not the first time I've been in a situation like this," she replied simply. Then, after a pause, she added, "Sometimes life throws challenges at us when we least expect them. The key is to stay calm and find solutions instead of panicking." Her words lingered in the air, resonating deeper than anyone anticipated. As they waited for rescue, Emily began sharing stories about traveling to remote villages, working with communities in need, and finding joy in simplicity. Her tales painted a picture of a life rich in experiences rather than material possessions. Slowly but surely, the trio found themselves drawn to her, their initial disdain giving way to intrigue. When the elevator finally resumed its ascent and the doors opened, revealing the glittering penthouse ballroom beyond, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. What had started as a moment of ridicule had transformed into something neither side saw coming. And unbeknownst to the three women, their encounter with Emily was far from over. It was only the beginning of a lesson they would never forget. As the elevator doors slid open, revealing the grandeur of the penthouse ballroom, Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia stepped out with a mix of relief and lingering embarrassment. The sudden halt between floors had shaken them more than they cared to admit, but what truly unsettled them was Emily's calm demeanor during the ordeal. They couldn't shake the image of her standing there, composed and resourceful while they had spiraled into panic. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She was supposed to be the awkward outsider, the one who didn't belong. Yet somehow, she had managed to command the situation with quiet authority. The ballroom was a sight to behold, bathed in soft golden light from crystal chandeliers that hung like stars above the crowd. Waiters glided through the room carrying trays of champagne flutes, their movements smooth and practiced. A string quartet played classical music in the corner, adding an air of elegance to the gathering. The space buzzed with conversation as guests mingled, laughing and exchanging pleasantries. But despite the opulence surrounding them, Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia couldn't focus on the evening ahead. Their thoughts kept circling back to the woman they had mocked just moments ago. Emily lingered near the entrance, seemingly unfazed by the luxury around her. She stood quietly, observing the scene with a thoughtful expression. Her modest attire still contrasted sharply with the designer dresses and tailored suits of the other attendees, yet there was something magnetic about her presence. People nearby began noticing her, not because of her appearance but because of the aura she carried. There was a warmth in her smile, a kindness in her eyes that drew people in without her having to say a word. Claire nudged Vanessa, her voice low but tinged with unease. "Do you think she's crashing the party? I mean, look at her. She doesn't exactly fit in here." Vanessa frowned, scanning the room. "I don't know. Maybe she's someone's assistant or, I don't know, maybe she's lost." Patricia rolled her eyes. "Lost? In this building?" "Hardly. No one gets past the lobby unless they're invited. Besides," she added, lowering her voice further, "didn't you see how she handled that elevator thing? She knew exactly what to do. That wasn't luck. It was experience." Their whispered conversation was interrupted when a tall, impeccably dressed man entered the room. He moved with purpose, his confident stride turning heads as he approached Emily. His dark suit fit him perfectly, and his sharp features were softened by a warm smile. As he reached her side, he placed a hand gently on her shoulder, his touch intimate and familiar. "My love," he said, his voice carrying just enough volume for those nearby to hear. "Are you all right? I heard about the elevator issue. Are you okay?" Emily turned to him, her face lighting up with genuine affection. "I'm fine, Alex. Just a little delay, nothing serious." She gestured toward the trio, though not accusingly. "These ladies were kind enough to keep me company until help arrived." Alex nodded politely, acknowledging Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia with a brief glance before returning his attention to Emily. Wrapping an arm around her waist, he pulled her close, his protective stance unmistakable. It was then that recognition dawned on the three women. Their eyes widened in shock as they pieced together who this man was and what it meant for Emily. "Wait," Claire stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is that Alexander Carter?" Vanessa gasped, clutching her pearls. "Oh my God, it is him. The billionaire, the tech genius." Patricia's jaw dropped as she stared at the couple. "That means she's—" They didn't need to finish the sentence. The realization hit them like a tidal wave, leaving them speechless. Emily Carter, the woman they had ridiculed in the elevator, was married to Alexander Carter, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the world. The same man whose innovations had revolutionized industries and whose philanthropy had touched millions of lives. And they had mocked her. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The hum of conversation in the ballroom faded into the background as Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia processed their mistake. Their faces flushed crimson with shame, and their earlier bravado crumbled under the weight of their guilt. All the snide comments, the condescending remarks, they replayed in their minds, each word cutting deeper than before. Emily, however, showed no sign of gloating. Instead, she smiled softly, almost pityingly, at the trio. There was no malice in her gaze, only understanding. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence spoke volumes. It was as if she already knew what they were feeling and chose to let them sit with their discomfort rather than rub their error in their faces. Alexander, sensing the tension, gave Emily a questioning look. "Everything all right?" he asked, his tone gentle but firm. Emily nodded, squeezing his hand reassuringly. "Yes, darling, everything's fine." With that, the couple turned and walked toward the center of the room, where a small group of admirers eagerly awaited them. Guests flocked to greet Alexander, congratulating him on his latest achievements and praising his contributions to society. Emily remained by his side, engaging in conversations with ease and grace. She listened intently when others spoke, offered thoughtful responses, and radiated humility despite the adoration showered upon her husband. Meanwhile, Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia huddled together at the edge of the room, their earlier confidence completely shattered. They watched as Emily navigated the crowd with poise, her every move exuding elegance and authenticity. It became painfully clear that her worth wasn't tied to flashy clothes or expensive accessories. It came from within. "She's amazing," Vanessa murmured, her voice filled with awe. "How did we not see it?" Claire shook her head, guilt gnawing at her insides. "We judged her based on her looks, her clothes. We didn't even give her a chance." Patricia sighed heavily, rubbing her temples. "What have we done? We made fools of ourselves." Their reflections were interrupted when Alexander took the stage to deliver a short speech. Standing beside him, Emily looked radiant, her presence grounding him as he addressed the audience. He spoke passionately about innovation, progress, and the importance of using wealth and influence to uplift others. When he finished, Emily stepped forward to add a few words of her own. "I want to take a moment to talk about something that's very close to my heart," she began, her voice steady and sincere. "In life, we often make assumptions about people based on appearances or circumstances. We judge them before we truly know them. But real value isn't found in what we wear or where we live. It's found in how we treat others, especially those who can't offer us anything in return." Her words resonated deeply, not just with Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia, but with everyone in the room. For the trio, it felt like a direct message, one they desperately needed to hear. By the time Emily concluded her remarks, applause erupted throughout the ballroom. Yet amidst the cheers, Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia sat in stunned silence, grappling with the weight of their actions. As the evening wore on, the three women found themselves unable to enjoy the festivities. Every laugh, every sip of champagne, tasted bitter now. They couldn't escape the truth. They had misjudged Emily horribly, and their behavior had been cruel and shallow. For the first time in years, they felt genuinely remorseful, not just for what they had said, but for the attitudes that had driven their words. And so, as the clock ticked closer to midnight, Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia made a silent vow to themselves. They would find a way to make amends, not because they feared retribution, but because they realized they owed it to Emily. More importantly, they owed it to themselves to become better people. Little did they know, this encounter was about to change their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The charity gala continued in full swing, with guests mingling, laughing, and enjoying the lavish spread of gourmet food and fine wine. The penthouse ballroom buzzed with energy, yet Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia remained rooted to their spots, near the edge of the room. Their minds were elsewhere, consumed by guilt, regret, and disbelief at the revelation that had just unfolded before them. Emily Carter, the woman they had mocked mercilessly in the elevator, was married to Alexander Carter, one of the most powerful men in the world. As the evening progressed, Emily moved gracefully through the crowd, engaging in conversations with ease. She spoke warmly with philanthropists, entrepreneurs, and activists alike, her genuine interest evident in every interaction. Her humility stood out starkly against the backdrop of wealth and privilege surrounding her. Despite being surrounded by people eager to bask in her husband's fame, or perhaps because of it, Emily carried herself with a quiet dignity that commanded respect. It wasn't hard to see why Alexander adored her. She was the antithesis of arrogance, a beacon of authenticity in a sea of pretense. Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia watched her from afar, unable to tear their eyes away. They whispered among themselves, dissecting every detail of the evening. The way Emily smiled when someone complimented her, the way she listened intently during conversations without interrupting, and the effortless grace with which she handled even the most trivial exchanges. Each observation only deepened their shame. How could they have been so blind? How could they have reduced her to nothing more than her clothes, dismissing her as unworthy of their attention? "She's incredible," Vanessa murmured, shaking her head in disbelief. "I mean, look at her. She doesn't need designer gowns or diamonds to shine, she just is." Claire nodded slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "And we treated her like she didn't belong here, like she was some kind of intruder." Patricia buried her face in her hands, groaning softly. "We're horrible. Absolutely horrible. What must she think of us?" Their reflections were interrupted when Emily stepped onto the stage once again. This time, she addressed the audience on her own, speaking about the importance of compassion and empathy in a world often driven by appearances. Her voice was calm but filled with conviction, each word landing like a gentle yet firm reminder of their misdeeds. In our daily lives, we encounter countless people, some who seem familiar, others who might feel different or unfamiliar. Emily began, her gaze sweeping across the room. But behind every face is a story, a journey, a set of experiences that shape who they are. When we judge others too quickly, we miss the opportunity to connect with something truly meaningful. Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply with everyone present. For Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia, however, they felt like a direct message, a mirror reflecting their own behavior back at them. They shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact with one another as Emily continued. "Kindness costs nothing, but its impact can be immeasurable," she said, her tone softening. "It's easy to show kindness to those who remind us of ourselves, to those who share our values, our lifestyles, our perspectives. But true strength lies in extending that same kindness to those who may seem different from us. Because in the end, we're all human. We all crave understanding, acceptance, and love." The room erupted in applause, but Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia barely registered the sound. They sat frozen, their hearts heavy with remorse. Emily's speech wasn't accusatory or vindictive. It was a universal call for reflection and growth. And yet to the three women it felt personal, as if she had reached into their souls and exposed the flaws they tried so desperately to hide. When Emily left the stage, returning to Alexander's side, the trio knew what they had to do. They couldn't undo the past, but they could try to make amends. Summoning every ounce of courage they possessed, they approached her cautiously, their heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Emily noticed them immediately, her expression unreadable as they stopped a few feet away. Claire cleared her throat nervously, struggling to find the right words. "Mrs. Carter?" she began, her voice trembling slightly. May we speak with you for a moment?" Emily turned to face them fully, her calm demeanor unchanged. "Of course," she replied simply, gesturing for them to follow her to a quieter corner of the room. Alexander gave her a questioning glance, but she reassured him with a smile before walking away. Once they were alone, Claire took a deep breath and plunged ahead. "First of all, we want to apologize for everything, for how we treated you in the elevator earlier tonight. We were cruel, judgmental, and we're so sorry." Vanessa nodded vigorously, tears welling up in her eyes. "You didn't deserve any of it. We judged you based on your appearance, and that was wrong. So wrong. You're amazing, and we were too blinded by our own insecurities to see it," Patricia added, her voice choked with emotion. "Please believe us when we say we never meant to hurt you. We were petty and shallow, and we're truly ashamed of ourselves." For a long moment, Emily studied them in silence, her gaze steady but not unkind. Then she sighed softly and offered them a small, forgiving smile. "Thank you for apologizing," she said gently. "That takes courage, and I appreciate it. But let me ask you something. Why does it matter who my husband is? Why should that change how you treat me?" Her question caught them off guard, forcing them to confront the root of their behavior. Claire hesitated before answering. "I guess we assumed you weren't like us, that you didn't belong here. But now we realize how unfair that was." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "Appearances can be deceiving. Just because someone looks different or comes from a different background doesn't mean they're less worthy of respect. True character isn't defined by what we wear or where we live. It's defined by how we treat others, especially when no one is watching." Her words struck a chord, leaving the trio speechless. They had spent their entire lives chasing status and validation, measuring their worth by material possessions and social standing. Yet here was Emily, living proof that true fulfillment came from within, from kindness, humility, and a willingness to embrace others without judgment. "We'll do better," Vanessa promised, her voice breaking. "We swear we'll do better." Emily smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on Vanessa's arm. "I believe you will. Everyone makes mistakes. It's part of being human. What matters is what you do next. Use this as an opportunity to grow, to become better versions of yourselves." With that, she excused herself, rejoining Alexander and resuming her role as hostess of the evening. Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia stood there for a moment longer, absorbing her advice and vowing silently to change. For the first time in years, they felt a spark of hope, not just for redemption but for transformation. As the night drew to a close and guests began filing out of the ballroom, the trio lingered behind, watching Emily from a distance. She laughed, easily with Alexander, her joy infectious and genuine. There was no trace of bitterness or resentment in her demeanor, only grace and kindness. In that moment, Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia realized that Emily wasn't just extraordinary because of her connection to Alexander. She was extraordinary because of who she was, a woman whose inner beauty far surpassed anything money could buy. And though they still had a long way to go in making amends, they knew one thing for certain. Their encounter with Emily would stay with them forever, serving as a constant reminder of the power of humility, compassion, and second chances. The days following the charity gala felt like a turning point for Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia. They returned to their daily routines, but nothing seemed quite the same. The memory of Emily's quiet strength and unwavering kindness lingered, in their minds, haunting them, not out of fear but out of a deep desire to change. For years they had prided themselves on their polished appearances, exclusive social circles, and enviable lifestyles. Yet now those things felt hollow, like gilded cages that had kept them trapped in shallow values. Claire was the first to act. She couldn't shake the image of Emily speaking about compassion and empathy during her speech at the gala. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the sincerity behind them. Claire realized that she had spent most of her life insulated by privilege, rarely venturing outside her comfort zone to understand the struggles of others. Determined to break free from this pattern, she decided to volunteer at a local shelter. At first, stepping into the modest building filled with worn furniture and mismatched plates made her feel out of place. The scent of disinfectant mixed with the faint aroma of reheated meals reminded her how far removed she'd been from the realities faced by so many people. But as she began serving food to families who smiled gratefully despite their hardships, something shifted inside her. She listened to their stories of job losses, medical bills, and dreams deferred, and found herself humbled. These were not faceless statistics. They were real people with hopes and fears just like hers. By the end of her first shift, Claire felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced in years. Helping others, even in small ways, gave her purpose. Vanessa, too, underwent a transformation, though hers took a different form. Her guilt over mocking Emily gnawed at her relentlessly, particularly because she recognized how much of her identity had been tied to superficial relationships. She realized that many of her friends weren't truly friends at all. They were acquaintances who flattered her wealth and status while offering little substance in return. Inspired by Emily's authenticity, Vanessa started reevaluating her connections. One by one, she distanced herself from toxic friendships built on envy and competition. Instead, she sought out individuals who valued honesty, vulnerability, and mutual support. Through this process, Vanessa discovered a newfound appreciation for meaningful conversations. She joined a book club focused on literature about social justice and personal growth, where members openly shared their thoughts and experiences. At first, she hesitated to open up, fearing judgment or ridicule. But as she witnessed others sharing their struggles without reservation, she slowly let her guard down. For the first time in her life, Vanessa felt seen, not for her designer wardrobe or flawless makeup, but for who she truly was beneath the surface. This sense of belonging became a cornerstone of her healing journey. Patricia, meanwhile, channeled her remorse into action. Unlike Claire and Vanessa, she had always been deeply involved in charitable causes, but only in name. Attending galas, writing checks, and posing for photos were her primary contributions, allowing her to maintain an air of philanthropy without ever getting her hands dirty. After meeting Emily, however, Patricia understood that true generosity required more than financial donations. It demanded time, effort, and genuine care. She began working closely with organizations dedicated to education and mentorship programs for underprivileged youth. At first, walking into classrooms filled with eager yet uncertain faces intimidated her. What could she possibly teach them? But as she spent more time interacting with students, listening to their aspirations and challenges, she realized that her presence mattered. Whether it was helping a teenager draft a college application essay or simply encouraging a child to dream bigger, Patricia saw firsthand the impact of showing up, not as a distant benefactor, but as a human being willing to connect. Her efforts didn't stop there. Inspired by Emily's advocacy for humility and equality, Patricia used her influence to amplify voices often overlooked in society. She hosted events highlighting grassroots activists and community leaders, giving them platforms to share their work with broader audiences. Though these initiatives required significant sacrifices of both time and ego, Patricia found immense satisfaction in using her resources for good rather than glory. As weeks turned into months, the changes in Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia became impossible to ignore. Friends and acquaintances noticed shifts in their behavior, how they spoke less about material possessions and more about meaningful experiences, how they prioritized kindness over appearances, and how they carried themselves with a quiet confidence, born of self-awareness. Some admired their transformations while others dismissed them as fleeting phases. But none of that mattered to the trio. They weren't seeking validation anymore. They were striving for authenticity. Their paths occasionally crossed again, not just with each other but also with Emily. Each encounter served as a reminder of the lessons they had learned. Emily never brought up the incident in the elevator, nor did she treat them differently. If anything, she welcomed them warmly, always ready to engage in thoughtful conversations or offer encouragement when needed. Her consistent grace reinforced their commitment to becoming better versions of themselves. One evening, several months after the gala, the three women found themselves attending another high-profile event, a fundraiser for affordable housing initiatives. As they mingled among the crowd, they spotted Emily across the room, chatting animatedly with a group of volunteers. She looked radiant as ever, her simplicity standing out amidst the sea of glitz and glamour. Without hesitation, Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia approached her, their smiles genuine and heartfelt. "Emily," Claire began, her voice steady, "we just wanted to thank you for everything. Your words that night, they changed us." "Really?" Vanessa nodded earnestly. "You inspired us to look beyond ourselves, to see the world differently. We're still learning, but we're trying." Patricia added, her eyes glistening with emotion, "And we'll keep trying because of you." Emily studied them for a moment, her expression softening. Then she smiled, a smile that conveyed understanding, forgiveness, and hope. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Growth isn't easy, but it's worth it. Keep going." With those parting words, she excused herself to tend to other guests, leaving the trio standing together, united by a shared mission. They knew they would stumble along the way. Old habits die hard. But they also knew they were moving in the right direction. The journey ahead wouldn't be perfect, but it would be meaningful. And for Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia, that was enough. Months had passed since the charity gala, and Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia continued to embrace their newfound paths of self-improvement. Each woman pursued her own journey of growth, yet they remained connected by the shared experience that had sparked their transformation. They often met for coffee or lunch, not to gossip or flaunt their latest purchases as they once did, but to share updates on their progress and encourage one another. These gatherings became a source of strength and accountability, helping them stay grounded in their commitment to change. Claire's volunteer work at the shelter had evolved into something far more meaningful than she ever imagined. What began as a tentative step outside her comfort zone quickly turned into a passion project. She discovered talents and skills within herself that she hadn't known existed, organizing fundraisers, coordinating food drives, and even mentoring young adults trying to rebuild their lives. Her days were no longer consumed solely by shopping trips or social events. Instead, she found joy in rolling up her sleeves and getting her hands dirty, whether it was sorting donations or serving meals late into the night. One particular moment stood out vividly in her memory. A young mother named Lisa, who frequently visited the shelter with her 2 children, approached Claire after weeks of quiet observation. "Thank you," Lisa said softly, clutching her toddler's hand. "I've been coming here for months, and seeing people like you care, it gives me hope. It reminds me that I'm not alone." Those words stayed with Claire long after the conversation ended. For the first time in her life, she felt truly useful, not because of what she owned, but because of what she could give. Vanessa's transformation unfolded in quieter, more introspective ways. Cutting ties with superficial friendships had left her feeling vulnerable at first, but it also opened doors to deeper connections. The book club she joined became a lifeline, introducing her to individuals who challenged her perspectives and encouraged her to grow. Through discussions about literature and life, she learned to confront her insecurities head-on, rather than masking them with designer labels or witty banter. Her most profound breakthrough came during a weekend retreat organized by the group. Sitting around a campfire under a starry sky, each member was invited to share a personal story or struggle. When it was Vanessa's turn, she hesitated, unsure if she could open up about the pain of feeling perpetually judged, even by herself. But as she began speaking, tears streaming down her face, she realized how liberating vulnerability could be. The supportive murmurs and nods from her peers reassured her that she wasn't defined by her mistakes or shortcomings. That night marked a turning point. Vanessa finally accepted herself as worthy of love and belonging, flaws and all. Patricia, meanwhile, threw herself wholeheartedly into her advocacy work. Her efforts expanded beyond affordable housing initiatives to include programs addressing education inequality and healthcare access. She traveled extensively, meeting grassroots activists, and learning directly from communities affected by systemic challenges. These experiences humbled her further, reinforcing the importance of listening before acting, a lesson Emily had subtly imparted through her actions. One of Patricia's proudest achievements was organizing a large-scale summit where underrepresented voices took center stage. Speakers ranged from single mothers advocating for child care reform to teenagers fighting for climate justice. Watching these courageous individuals command attention in rooms filled with influential leaders filled Patricia with pride, not for herself, but for the ripple effect their stories would create. Afterward, several attendees approached her, thanking her for creating space for marginalized narratives. "You're making a difference," one woman told her earnestly. Patricia smiled, knowing she still had much to learn but grateful for the opportunity to contribute. As their individual journeys unfolded, Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia occasionally crossed paths with Emily. Their interactions grew warmer and more natural, free of the awkwardness that had characterized their earlier encounters. Emily never pressured them to explain themselves or dwell on past mistakes. Instead, she celebrated their growth with quiet encouragement. Her presence served as both a reminder of how far they'd come and an inspiration to keep pushing forward. One crisp autumn afternoon, the trio decided to visit a local community garden, a place Claire had helped establish through her shelter outreach efforts. The garden was a vibrant tapestry of greenery, bursting with vegetables, herbs, and flowers tended by volunteers from diverse backgrounds. As they walked among the rows of plants, admiring the fruits of collective labor, they reflected on how much their lives had changed since that fateful elevator ride. "I never thought I'd find happiness doing something so ordinary," Claire admitted, brushing dirt off her hands after pulling weeds. "But this feels real, it feels right." Vanessa nodded, leaning against a wooden fence. "For me, it's been about letting go of perfection. I used to think I had to have everything figured out all the time. Now I realize it's okay to stumble as long as I get back up. And for me," Patricia added, plucking a ripe tomato from a nearby vine, "it's been about using my privilege responsibly. Not just giving money, but showing up and being present. It's exhausting, but it's rewarding in ways I can't put into words." Their conversation paused as laughter erupted from a nearby picnic area, where families gathered to enjoy homemade meals prepared with ingredients harvested from the garden. Children chased butterflies while elders swapped stories over steaming cups of tea. The scene painted a picture of unity and resilience, a testament to the power of community. Later that evening, as they sat together sipping hot cocoa, Claire voiced a question that had been on all their minds. "Do you think we'll ever stop feeling guilty about what happened? About how we treated Emily?" Vanessa sighed, staring into her mug. "Probably not completely, and maybe that's okay. Guilt keeps us accountable. As long as we channel it into doing better, it doesn't have to weigh us down," Patricia agreed. "Emily showed us grace when we didn't deserve it. The least we can do is honor that by continuing to grow. We might not be perfect, but we're trying. And isn't that what matters?" They parted ways that night with renewed determination, each carrying a piece of the garden's harvest as a symbol of hope and renewal. Though their journeys were far from over, they knew they were heading in the right direction. Together, they had transformed shame into purpose, judgment into understanding, and regret into redemption. And somewhere along the way, they had discovered the true meaning of worth, not in wealth or status, but in kindness, humility, and the courage to change. Little did they know, their story was far from finished. Change, after all, is a journey without a final destination. Months turned into a year, and Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia continued to evolve in ways they never imagined possible. Their lives were no longer dictated by the shallow pursuits of wealth and status, but instead centered around purpose, connection, and growth. Each woman had carved out a unique path that reflected her values, yet their shared experiences kept them bonded together. They remained committed to supporting one another, knowing that the journey of self-improvement was ongoing. Claire's work at the shelter had blossomed into something extraordinary. What started as volunteering had transformed into leadership, when she was asked to oversee the community garden project, a role she embraced with enthusiasm. Under her guidance, the garden became more than just a source of fresh produce. It evolved into a hub for education and empowerment. Local schools brought students to learn about sustainable farming, while unemployed adults received training in agriculture and entrepreneurship. Claire found herself mentoring young people who dreamed of starting their own businesses or pursuing careers in environmental science. Her confidence grew alongside her impact, and she began speaking at conferences about the importance of grassroots initiatives in addressing food insecurity. One evening, after a particularly successful harvest festival hosted at the garden, Claire stood under a string of twinkling lights, watching families laugh and dance together. A teenage boy named Marcus approached her, holding a basket of freshly picked vegetables. "Miss Claire," he said shyly, "I wanted to thank you. You've helped me believe I can do anything." Claire blinked back tears, realizing how far she'd come from the days when her worth was tied to designer handbags and exclusive parties. This moment, this genuine connection, was worth more than any luxury she'd once coveted. Vanessa, too, had undergone a profound transformation. The book club that initially drew her in had become a cornerstone of her life, but it wasn't just literature that fueled her growth. It was the relationships she built along the way. She discovered a passion for writing and began chronicling her journey in a personal blog. At first hesitant to share her vulnerabilities publicly, Vanessa soon realized that her honesty resonated with readers. Her posts about overcoming judgmental tendencies, embracing imperfection, and finding beauty in simplicity attracted a loyal following. People reached out to thank her for putting words to feelings they couldn't articulate themselves. Her newfound voice led to opportunities she hadn't anticipated. Local schools invited her to speak to students about self-acceptance and resilience. One day, standing in front of a classroom of teenagers, she shared her story. The pain of being mocked in the elevator, the guilt that followed, and the redemption she found through humility and effort. When a girl raised her hand and asked, "How did you stop caring what other people think?" Vanessa smiled. "I didn't stop caring," she replied, "but I learned to care more about what I thought of myself." Patricia's advocacy work continued to expand, earning her recognition not just locally but nationally. Her summits and fundraisers brought attention to issues often overlooked by mainstream media, amplifying voices that desperately needed to be heard. Yet despite her growing influence, Patricia remained grounded, always prioritizing the needs of the communities she served over her own ego. She traveled extensively, meeting individuals whose courage inspired her daily, from single mothers fighting for affordable childcare to activists risking everything to protect the environment. During one such trip, Patricia visited a rural village, working to combat water scarcity. As she watched children collect clean water from a newly installed well funded by her organization, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. A little girl handed her a flower, saying simply, "Thank you." Patricia tucked the bloom behind her ear, vowing never to take her privilege for granted again. That night, sitting under a blanket of stars, she reflected on how much her perspective had shifted. Wealth wasn't measured in dollars or possessions, it was measured in the lives touched and improved. Despite their individual successes, Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia stayed connected, meeting regularly to check in on one another's progress. These gatherings weren't just about celebrating achievements, they were also safe spaces to discuss challenges and setbacks. There were moments when old habits crept back in, tempting them to revert to their former selves. But each time, they reminded one another why they had started this journey in the first place, because change, though difficult, was worth it. Their paths occasionally crossed with Emily, who remained a steady presence in their lives. Whether it was bumping into her at charity events or receiving heartfelt notes of encouragement, Emily's influence lingered quietly yet powerfully. She never sought acknowledgement for the ripple effect she had created, but the trio knew they wouldn't be where they were without her. Her grace and wisdom had set them on a course toward redemption, teaching them that true strength lies in rising above pettiness and embracing compassion. On a crisp spring evening, nearly a year after the gala, Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia attended Another high-profile event, this time hosted by Alexander and Emily Carter. The penthouse ballroom looked much the same as it had that fateful night, glittering with chandeliers and buzzing with conversation. But this time, the three women entered with heads held high, no longer burdened by shame or fear. They mingled confidently, sharing stories of their work and connecting with like-minded individuals. When Emily spotted them across the room, she excused herself from a group of guests and made her way over. "Ladies," she greeted warmly, pulling each of them into a hug. "It's wonderful to see you." "You too," Claire replied, smiling brightly. "We wanted to thank you for inspiring us to keep going. We wouldn't be here without you." Emily shook her head gently. "You did the hard work. All I did was remind you of your potential." Vanessa laughed softly. "Well, reminders are powerful things, and yours came at exactly the right time." As the evening unfolded, the trio found themselves reflecting on how far they'd come. They had entered the building as strangers bound by arrogance and ignorance, only to leave transformed by humility and understanding. The journey hadn't been easy. It had required confronting uncomfortable truths, shedding old identities, and rebuilding from the ground up. But every step had been worth it. Later that night, as they stood together on the balcony overlooking the city skyline, Patricia raised a glass. "To second chances," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "And to becoming the best versions of ourselves." "To kindness," Vanessa added, clinking her glass against Patricia's. "And to never forgetting where we started," Claire finished, joining in. Together they toasted to the lessons they had learned and the lives they had changed, including their own. The camera panned out, or narrative faded, as the trio laughed and talked, their bond stronger than ever. Below them, the city pulsed with life, a reminder of the countless stories waiting to unfold. For Claire, Vanessa, and Patricia, the past year had been a testament to the power of redemption, not just for themselves, but for everyone willing to embrace growth and grace. And as long as they carried those lessons forward, their journey would continue to inspire others, proving that true worth isn't measured by appearances, but by character, compassion, and the courage to change.